She gave me the love that she had for children's books. I'm not a collector, but the one collection I do have, which continually delights me, is a collection of children's books. And even though my children are grown, we often give each other books as gifts. I feel like the author Hans Wilhelm, who said, "I don't like the term children's books. I think they are books for adults that are even good enough for children." The love that I have came from my mother.
Well, and the other fun thing that I find myself doing, and Aunt Jeannie does the same thing, is we discover a new children's book that we love, and we email immediately all the siblings, "Oh, you gotta read such and such," you know.
And there's something about a parent reading to a child out loud that is more important than just having them read themselves. I gained a love of literature primarily from my mother because of the way she loved books and loved great literature, and instilled that in us from the time that we were very young. And I'm sure that's why I eventually became an English major, and I remember the same thing with learning to write and writing and getting a love for writing, and I see the same traits in my sisters. If you look at them, they're all really good at expressing themselves, and they have good writing skills and good reading skills and good language skills. It came from both my parents, probably more so from my mother, but also from my dad.
She was one of the first reasons that I really had a desire to travel and see the world, because she'd come back with stories of what things were like in different places in the world. And I think that's something that both of them really passed on, is their love for learning.
And I think that I had always had that concept because of the way my family had treated others. And that was a real blessing. When we went to live in England, we didn't want to be the ugly Americans. We wanted to have an English experience, not an American experience in England. Because we figured they had good reasons for living the way they did, and we just needed to know what they were. And I feel like all my life I've been influenced by that thought that my parents valued others, even if they were different from us, and considered their worth. And so I needed to find out what that was.
I'm a teacher, so that's something. I love music. I love children's books. One thing is, I've been to Scotland, and I remember thinking a lot about our Scottish heritage when I went to Scotland, and just who we are and what we came from. I love to be outside, and I actually really like to garden. It is therapeutic for me to go dig in the dirt, and I think of I just remember looking or coming out in the backyard in Findlay and seeing Grandma and Grandpa, kneeling over the garden and working in the garden. I mean, I still have that vision of.
I have a daughter that one day she was home from college, and she just went out there, and she could have done anything, and I was just astounded. She went out and gardened all day, pulled weeds, and she came in. This was Sarah, my third daughter, and she said, "Oh, that was so fun." And I looked at her, and I just thought of Grandma. I thought of Grandma and Grandpa. I thought that is directly from them, because she didn't get it from me, because I haven't been out there pulling weeds. She got it from them. That there was a love that was just passed right down.
I think my love of nature and my love of the outdoors came from my parents. The mountains were covered with colored leaves, and it was just it was a piece of art out our window, and it just reminded me of my mother, who would say the same thing. She'd say, "Look," and we'd look out the window, and our front window, there was always this beautiful mountain out the window, and the moon coming over the mountain, or the sun coming over the mountain, or the sunrise or the sunset. She was always noticing beautiful nature and pointing it out to us. And I think of her a lot when I see beautiful nature.
Nothing made her happier than when we were singing around the piano. And now I'm the same way. I love having my children and grandchildren sing and play instruments together.
I think also the love for music and drama. I see my children have grown to love those things too, and have some inherent talents that I think have come through the McAllister line. Beautiful. They have grandmother's father had a beautiful singing voice, and they loved music. They sacrificed to provide lessons, dancing lessons, singing, music, piano lessons, violin lessons for their children. And that definitely had an effect on my mother and us growing up in our home.
We all love music and we love drama. Our idea of fun is making home videos, but I've always really loved music and plays, and I didn't really know why, and I think that's been passed down to us from generations actually. But I performed once in a dress that her mother had made for her, and
I remember the stick to a job till it sticks to you part, and don't watch the clock, just focus on playing and stick with it until an hour is up. And I remember that being a hard lesson to learn. But I feel like now, sticking to things until the job is done, no matter what the consequences are, no matter how late it is, or if I haven't eaten, or whatever the requirements are, that I stick to it until it's done, until I feel good about it. And I think that's something that I learned from my mother through my piano experience, practicing the piano, and from my dad, learning that when I started a row in the orchard of hoeing, that for example, hoeing tomatoes, I needed to hoe from one end of the row clear to the other end. And I didn't quit until I finished at the other end. I could stop and rest for a minute or take a break, but I didn't quit until I had reached the end of the row. So I'm sure there are many things, but that's certainly one trait that I'm sure I learned from them.
And he taught us that we should keep our foot in the earth and our head in the sky, so that we would always know where we were going and where we came from.
A lot of what my family is not because I sat down and said, these are the things we need to learn. It's because of just who I am, and I am because of who they were. But being healthy is one of those things. Eating a variety of good, healthy food is another thing. My mother always made everything that we ate. If you could make it, and if you had time to make it, you didn't go to the store and buy it, because it wouldn't be as healthy. I knew that from the time I was little. My mom always had a little pot with parsley and a little pot with chives, and those two things I remember in our kitchen. And she would cut them off and put them in whatever she was seasoning, and I'd do the same thing.
But I just remember this impression from the time that I was small, that the gospel was really central to who they were. Choosing to follow Christ was something that mattered in everything that they did, living with integrity and being honest, striving for education and discipline and improving yourself. All of these things were part of who they were and who they really encouraged us to be. We always went to church when we were visiting grandmother, and she served a faithful mission and told us all about that and how wonderful that experience was. So it was definitely something that was just ingrained in who she was, who Grandpa was, and that was something that was, I think, they made really clear to each of us.
I think it was everything to her. I think it was her blood that flowed through her veins. It just was. And she sent that on to the next generations. It was a gift that she gave to those who came after her. They have the same feeling, I can tell, in the children that she's had and the grandchildren that have come after that.
Everything pretty much that I have value probably came from them. But I was thinking about that once, and I thought, well, that's my family, or that's my parents. And then I realized that really all came from the gospel, and because they lived the gospel, and because my grandparents lived the gospel. And so what they did and what they believed was one thing. So everything they did was living the gospel, and it wasn't separate. So when I think as a young child, well, my family is wonderful because they do this, I realized when I was older, my family is wonderful because they live the gospel. They love God and they love their fellow men. So I guess that's the greatest thing, but particularly respect and love for each person. Dad always said, choose service in life. Choose what you can give the greatest service, and respect and love your fellow man, and remember the great worth of the individual. My mother lived her life the same way.
And the first thing I thought of is quotes on the fridge. There were always inspirational quotes on the fridge, and as we all do that. It is very obvious that the gospel was the center focus of that home, because all of their children, that is the center of our lives. There is an absolute pioneer legacy that was passed down, that they did not break that chain, they enhanced that chain. I never saw them do anything wrong ever in my life. So to me, that is what a great legacy to have this example that I can visually see and remember, to such loving grandparents.
So it was just part of our lives, and it was what we did. And when we had testimonies from the time we were tiny, I don't ever remember not having a testimony. I think there's a time when you feel that you decide to make a commitment to be really converted, to be really, to keep your covenants and to really set your own standard. But all my life I would think, well, I know this is true. If I would stop for a moment to think about my religion, and I'd think, how do I feel about this? I knew from experiences when I was tiny, the Spirit had spoken to me, that what we had practiced was true, and I didn't ever have to second guess that. And so it was a part of everything we did. It was every day, not only Sunday.
My parents had a lot of love, and it was very evident. I would want my children to remember how much my parents loved them, even though my children were very small. My parents, they just adored their grandchildren. They really did.
I felt like they always really loved us, and it wasn't really dependent on what we did. And I think that's what really gives you the ability to be better and to be good, and having that kind of faith from somebody in who you are lets you become more that kind of good person who really should be trusted and loved.
Because of the kind of lives they lived, because they were just pure in heart and good as gold, right through to the bone, they naturally lived their lives and they instilled in us all these good things. So years later, when we all had really tough challenges and hard times, we had something to reach down in and pull out. We could do those things because they had taught us attitudes of mind or attitudes of spirit or ways of coping or good habits. And what's really wonderful to me is I see that in all the grandchildren. I see that same thing. And that's the blessing of living well and marrying well, is your children and your children's children for generations are blessed because of that.
He and my mother gave me life, a secure home, the blessings of the gospel of Jesus Christ, and an example of integrity and goodness. As I grow older and experience more of life, my love and gratitude, my respect and admiration know no bounds. I cannot express the eternal love and gratitude I feel.
My patriarchal blessing says, many are your blessings, and they have come to you and will come to you through your parentage and through your lineage. And that is true every day of my life. I am so thankful for my mother and my father, and for their mothers and fathers, and for their mothers and fathers.